Hello, everybody. My name is Sylvain Rochon, and I just wrote another article, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time on it today by video, so that you guys who prefer video can check it out and maybe discuss in the comments. I'm also linking the actual article that's going to be published on Medium in the description if you prefer reading. And the charts I'm talking about different charts. They'll be in the article as well. Now, the subject is, why can't we solve humanity's biggest problems? And this has been on my mind my whole life. Like, we have these huge problems that are existential, that are huge, and we talk about them fairly often. We just don't do a whole lot about them, or it seems to be very small steps. And I'll get into why this is happening and why this is so. But some of the issues are things like war, poverty, overpopulation, environmental issues. Right now, climate change is the big thing, and that really encompasses most of what we may talk about for the environment. Although there are other topics that are related, but not exactly the same as well. There's a bunch of things that are serious, more topical to these days is even technology, like automation, like removing the jobs, are ways of actually making money so that we can survive as with our families. The economic collapse because of automation or other reasons, even famine. Things that are very, very basic. It's our environment, it's feeding ourselves, having sustenance for us and our family. Very basic stuff. And we are, in fact, risking all of that stuff constantly. And we're always worried about these things. But for the most part, people really don't seriously worry about those things, not to the point of getting sick, if it doesn't affect them directly. So if a person is really poor, well, they have an immediate concern about resolving that. But if most of the population are not poor, then it's hard to get anything done to resolve the actual issue of poverty, because the poor people are not part of the majority. It doesn't directly affect individuals, because really the key to getting anything done is usually an emotion, like fear. So if most people in Canada or in whatever country, wherever you are in your country, would have a certain strong emotion, then the population would demand the resolution of that emotion. That's why leaders have been using fear primarily as a tool for the population to kind of follow whatever decision they want. If you're a politician back in the old days, you'd have usually fear of the other, like whoever's on the other side of the border, different skin color, different language, whatever. There was no communication. People didn't know anybody outside of their own villages usually. So a leader would say, well, these barbarians, these evil people that eat babies and whatever, they would say all sorts of things. They're coming, or they may come, but we need to take their land, take control of them using our military so that they don't attack us and don't cause us grief. And that worked because it brings people that don't know any better, they don't have information, into a fearful mode, and you give them a solution to resolve that immediate felt fear. And this still happens today. Like most of these mentioned, people don't feel a very high stress, at least not the majority, because the majority are not feeling it. Climate change is more and more of a concern because you have an increased amount of severe weather, fires in California, typhoons and hurricanes, more frequent and deadlier, and we have families and friends that are suffering from that. So now we care more about the climate change. And there's a lot of research that shows that it exists, that it's a real thing. So the Paris Accord happened a few years ago. Most of the countries of the world agreed. This is not politicians that are so wise. Like, despite the population's lack of concern of climate change, they decide, being so wise, to get together and make an agreement. No, This is the population of most countries that are concerned, and it pushes the governments and the politicians that are self-preserving to take decisions like this. So that's great. Paris Accord has a bit of a plan to alleviate some of the human-made effects of climate change, or and also to reduce some of the natural effects of climate change, because climate change is climate change. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's man-made or if it's natural, it affects us. And we have technologies and methods that we could use to actually alleviate some of these problems. Something like that is more ambiguous, like overpopulation. People aren't really, we know that it is an existential threat if we keep breeding and not dying. Our whole planet will become uninhabitable just because of lack of resources, overconsumption. The environment's going to go crap, and we can't survive unless we establish ourselves in like artificial biomes and like using huge technologies. It would be a huge loss of life either way. But we really don't, we talk about it, we don't do anything about it because of our right to have children, for example. It's not an easy solution. People are going to complain if ever there is a law like they did in China a number of years ago, where they limited the amount of children. It was considered an immoral act by the rest of the world, whereas they were trying to deal with a real problem of overpopulation inside China and possibly also over the world. Right now, are we going to consider that? Well, it's still unpopular, yet it is a very clear and easy solution to overpopulation. We need to understand this is a big problem, but it's not an immediate threat. We're still able to eat. We don't really see any strain, any stress in the environment too much, at least not directly, so we kind of ignore it. But we do have a solution to that. It's a legislative solution that is very easy, but we need people to be on board with it. And that's what causes the disagreements. First, there's a lot of disinformation on the internet, so it's hard for people to, because they don't have good investigative skills. They don't. A lot of people, even in modern worlds, don't have a high enough education to know how to discern fact and fiction, conspiracies to real information. It takes skills to actually do that, and we don't really learn that in school so much, unless you're in the world of engineering or sciences, where it's part of the discipline. And even then, you have to go to college or university to actually get enough of it to really integrate that discipline into your life when you're reading news and so on. So how do we resolve all these major issues like war and whatever? Well, we need to keep the information level high. We need to keep getting informed. We need to teach each other how to read information, how to discern fact and fiction. And schools need to be more available and cheaper. We need to educate each other on methods of learning and reading. And we need to have a more stable baseline level of stress so that fear is not our immediate concern. And that falls into the area that I talk about quite a bit in my writings and everywhere about universal basic income. That is a short-term tool that would be huge, simply because if you eliminate poverty, and I can guarantee you, in Canada, the math is there. It would cost $76 billion a year for the similar plan to what we tried in Ontario as a pilot a year ago. It would cost us that amount to alleviate families from poverty, like bring families over the poverty line, basically. And that is a lot of money every year, but the cost of poverty is actually fairly equal to that. It's between 72 and $86 billion a year. That's the cost of poverty. So removing poverty pays for itself. It's not a cost or an economic problem. But what it does is you remove poverty entirely. That's one of the major problems. And you also put people in a position of less fear, less stress. Because if you know you can eat tomorrow and you have shelter, and you can have access to free healthcare and education like we have here in Canada already, well, then you're not in a position of fear. You're not trying to survive anymore. So you're thinking ahead. You're thinking about the more long-term stresses and problems. And now you're willing to discuss solutions regarding overpopulation, for example, because now your belly is full and your children's bellies are full, and you have a roof over your head that is guaranteed through your own payments, because you receive a stipend every month, and just because you're alive in the country, all that is paid for. You can spend it any way you want, but normally people would buy shelter and food. And then you can think about these non-immediate yet existential threats, and then you can push and elect the right officials into power that will negotiate with the rest of the world, because none of these issues are standalone issues. It's not a nation that can resolve it, although like poverty is one, you can solve it within a nation, but most of these, like the economy, is tied with the global economy. You can't really resolve an economic issue inside a country without it affecting others, and vice versa. Climate change is global. War obviously involves other countries and other nations in agreement that this is bad. We know each other. We're all connected with each other, with over 50% of the population connected to the internet. We all have relatives, friends, family, acquaintances all around the world. We know how people are. There's no boogeyman elsewhere to scare us, because we have access to the information. We know who they are. We care about people more because we have our belly full. Then other countries' famine situation become our problem, because then we're fine. We don't want other people, especially people that we know, or in countries that we know people. We don't want them to suffer. So we're looking for our governments and leadership to help them, to help others, because we're okay. So that's a huge, huge part. So there's really two parts. It's education and teaching each other good methods of getting the right information, which is also a part of education. And then the other part is to be active in the community while having a low stress level. So we need things like basic income before we can resolve the problems of automation. Actually, in part, it does temporarily resolve the automation issue, taking our jobs. Basic income would actually accelerate the automation, because we'd want a very efficient, clean way to provide goods and services that wouldn't be needed. So basic needs, food, shelter. And if we can automate those, it would make those very cheap, which means the stress on the economy on the basic income is actually less, because you'd buy mostly basic goods with using your stipend, your monthly or annual amounts. So to encourage automation, in particular for the provisioning of the basic needs, and that's something that is very desirable. The economy can be converted from an employment-based economy, which wouldn't work very long and much longer, to something that is citizen-centric, where we are the beneficiaries of the economy, not the cog that is needed for it to work. Because right now, if not enough people work, the whole economy shuts down, and it becomes terrible, because then everything crashes. We can't be at the center of a new economy. We have to be the beneficiaries, and the economy has to run around things that exist, that are recyclable, like the resources of the land, the atoms and the molecules that are on the land and the land itself. That is something we can use technology to recycle, use nature to recycle, which is another kind of an engine, which we already use, and we can take care of the environment, so that the resources do recycle, and we can automate a bunch of stuff so that we make it cheap. Basic income is already paying for itself just by alleviating poverty, but then you make it even cheaper so that the economy runs better with automation, and nobody needs to work for a living anymore. We can just work at our occupation out of pleasure, and spend a lot more time at school, and less stress, and we're less susceptible to fear tactics by leadership because we're well educated and we're comfortable and we can't take any bullshit. Well, less. So that's where we should be driving. And the reason why, the only reason why we're not creating implemented solutions to all these global major issues is because we're still stuck in that fear mode. All we need to do is get ourselves out of it. And the easiest and most modern and immediate discussion that we're having on that point is the universal basic income or unconditional basic income topic. Get that implemented in a few countries very quick. We'll see major changes in how the citizenry of that country will behave on the world stage, and things are going to start changing quite a bit. And that's the key. We can't be kept in fear. Fear is our enemy. Actually, yeah. Well, actually, isn't it a president? I forget who did, but an American president said the only thing we should fear is fear itself. Well, exactly. So let's get rid of it by giving ourselves a break, so that we don't need to struggle just to live. In the Western world, it's totally doable. It pays for itself. Not a problem. It's a solution leading to all major solutions to all major issues on the planet. So let's do it. Are you with me? Anyway, it is real. I'm laughing because it's kind of silly, but that is the solution. Let's get it done. Ciao for now.